Thank you. I'll give me 2 seconds and I'll tell you when we're live.
Okay, thank you.
We're live now.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Gloucestershire Strategic Economic Growth Scrutiny Committee. Our first one for a while, since obviously lockdown has now eased off a bit. We are now getting back into having our scrutiny meetings. Welcome to members of the public and all of the members of the committee. Nice to see that you're well. And right, I will start with apologies, Sophie.
Thank you, Chair. We have no apologies for this meeting.
Fabulous. Obviously, working from home might help. Right, direct declarations of interest. Have we got anybody with any interests? No. Right, okay. The minutes, is everybody happy with those? Anybody got anything to say? No. No, indicating again. Good. Obviously, I can't sign them, but any of the issues that would have been raised would have been taken. Right, okay. We're now going to hand over to item 4 to Patrick Molyneux for the Gloucestershire Economic Growth Joint Committee update. Patrick.
Morning, Chairman. Morning, everybody. Right, a little update on our meeting. This was the meeting of the Gloucestershire Economic Growth Joint Committee on Wednesday, the 3rd of June. I don't know about the rest of you, but that feels like a lifetime away to me now at the moment. It was an interesting meeting. I think it was actually the very first virtual full council meeting that we tried. So it was a bit of an experiment as well, but actually went very well. And I think it's proved to be very successful going forward. At the meeting, or prior to the meeting, in fact, there was a lot of discussion about, based on the COVID shutdown and the committees, and certainly the scrutiny committees not sitting, that how your scrutiny committee could get really involved with effectively the COVID recovery plan for Gloucestershire. We did at that meeting, as you know, questions from committee members or scrutiny committee members to try and help, give a bit of a balance and get your involvement. But I think that's going to be a discussion going forward about precisely how the two of our committees can work together best to help the recovery from COVID in Gloucestershire. So at the meeting, just a quick overview, the minutes are all online. There was obviously the scrutiny committee questions we went through. There was item 5 was the governance arrangement. The committee was due, the governance would run out in September this year. And so the committee governance has been extended by 18 months from September to ensure that the committee can legally proceed and take part and do what it needs to do. So that was resolved. We did have 2 funding bids for the SEDF, the Strategic Economic Growth Development Fund, which we approved. One was the Central Gloucestershire City Region Board, and the other was the Multimodal Transport Brief. Both, there's lots of information there online, and happy to answer questions or whatever if you've got any particular details or particular questions. There was the strategic planning funding proposal as well, and this was to continue the work of the strategic planning manager, but bringing that in-house, and so that was approved. There was a G1st LEP update, but I'm sure Dev is going to give you a more update this morning, so I won't bother with that too much. But then the key item of the meeting was actually the COVID-19 response, planning for Gloucestershire's economic recovery. It's fair to say that we are still in very uncertain times. This is a very fluid thing, and we are monitoring the situation fervently and making our plans appropriately as we go forward. But it is going to be a complicated affair for us to manage, and a lot of it is kind of out of our hands, really. I think you've seen in the news yesterday, particularly the number of job losses and things that have been announced as the furlough scheme is being rolled back. So there's a lot of stuff there that we just need to look at going forward. There was a couple of key things that came through from the meeting, and that was that effectively the committee would effectively take a coordinating role in the COVID-19 response from the County Council. So we work with all the partners, the LEP, but more importantly, the district and borough partners and city partners, so that we make sure we do have a united response across the county, that we're not treading on each other's toes, and we try not to miss any gaps that we feel somebody else is doing, and effectively try and have a coordinated response to this recovery across all parts of the district. Obviously, as we go forward, we need to be carefully monitoring all the data that comes through. As I said to you, we had big announcements yesterday in the news. And I think a key proposal then was to actually have an additional meeting of the Gloucestershire Economic Growth Joint Committee in July, later on this month, specifically to look at how the COVID-19 response recovery plan is coming forward and see what we need to do there. I think that's probably about as much as I can say, really. All the minutes, as said, are online, and I'm happy to answer questions, Joe.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions before I say something? Right, okay. Sorry, Kate.
Yeah, sorry. I did raise my hand, but it's probably a bit...
No, I've seen you now. I was just going to bring you in now. I was just looking down the list, sorry.
That's fine.
First, I've got Kate, and then I've got Brian.
Okay, just a couple of things that Patrick said towards the end of his presentation. One was that there's going to be another meeting of the Joint Committee, and I wondered if you could consider what the arrangements would be for us to scrutinise what they decide at that meeting. And the other thing I wanted to ask is, Joint Committee has agreed to the creation of a city region board to take forward the Vision 2050 work, but obviously that there's an impact on that board and its work from COVID-19, and also presumably that's the forum in which some joint working on recovery can also take place. So what's Patrick's views on that? How does the city region board's work fit in with the other work we're talking about?
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Yeah, I think in terms of the meeting at the end of the month, certainly I think me and Kevin, and probably amongst yourselves as well, Kate, I know you're very interested in this, I think we'll have discussions about how we can best utilise both committees to best effect, really, and make sure that you do have a good opportunity to scrutinise the work of the committees and the decisions. So I think that's something we'll work through in the next couple of weeks. In terms of the City Region Board, this was actually just to get the fund to establish the board. It will become, obviously, it's a key component of our 2050 project. And by a City Region Board, it does include the entire county, so that's important to note. And certainly that will have how that goes forward now in 2050. I mean, all of that, in some respects, needs to be revisited away based on COVID-19. I mean, COVID-19 has changed the world entirely. We've probably moved on in terms of the use of technology years ahead of where we would have been in the normal scheme of things. And certainly how people work and how the economy looks is likely to be changed dramatically as well. So certainly how we then as a county really push forward to the ambitions of 2050 will need to be tailored based on the current situation. So it'll have a key part to play. I think it will be one of the key partners across the county if we want to make this county, if we want to achieve the ambitions of 2050, and certainly if we want to come out of COVID-19 recovery, and then it will have to play a key part in that. But I think we'll have to see how the board is made up and what the constitution is and how we move that forward. But certainly I think it's going to be a key part of economic growth in the county going forward.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Patrick. I think it'd be useful for us to note that once that board has had a time to establish itself, it'd be useful for us to invite them to come and have a discussion about where they're going with Vision 2050 and what are the challenges that they're facing. I see nodding and thumbs up, so can we make a note of that? Thanks. Kevin, are you on mute?
I don't know, I was on mute then, sorry. I said I did ask at the joint meeting, and I think some of you who were there on video did actually hear me saying, I've asked the joint committee on how they are going to include us and how we are going to receive information to be able to scrutinise this, and that includes the City Region Board. So, and Mike was going to get back to us, so I haven't had anything yet. So that, I mean, I would like something, if we're going to discuss it in the next couple of weeks, Patrick, I would like to see what Mike's comments are as well, so that we can actually have a reasonable discussion about how going forward we can actually, you know, be participants in scrutinising this, all of this work. So, I mean, can we chase that up from Mike, please? Okay, so I've got Brian Robinson next. Brian.
Just try and put. Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't get the mic on in quick enough. Yes, thank you. I did ask the question at the growth committee, which was answered, but I just wanted to come back on part of that. I mean, I was interested in my original question about how you'd actually decided what to allocate to the City Region Board. I understand it's a fund rather than an actual spending commitment at this stage, but the detail behind it seemed quite light. And so obviously that will come out. But I think a more pressing question was how we respond to the COVID-19 crisis, because critical to that, obviously, it seems we're going to be spending some money to try and get the economy moving, and we have to do that relatively quickly to make sure it has impact. But actually doing the right thing is also important. Spending a lot of money and finding it you've actually gone off track is going to just be a waste of money and could actually delay us becoming recovery. So as that's quite a challenging decision on how we do that, we've got overlaying the economic recovery. We've got changes that were going on anyway in retail. We've got green issues. I just wondered how you were going to approach the decision making so that we can understand what's behind your thoughts and making sure that we're doing the right things for Gloucestershire. And then we can scrutinise the way you do that. Thank you.
Patrick, do you want to answer that?
Yes. Well, that's kind of a complicated question in some respects. And I think we're all trying to find our feet and work out how best we can approach this situation and how best we can work forward in this new normal, if you like. So I'm not entirely certain how to answer that at the moment. I think this is a joint discussion between us all at some stage. We have to all work together so we can find the best approach to actually making the right decisions, and actually for those decisions we scrutinise to ensure that we're learning lessons or make sure they are the right decisions. I think that process still needs to be worked through. But it's a collaborative thing. I think that's the key message here. I think we have to work together to make sure we do the right things. As far as we can tell, of course, I mean, these are very different times. This is, as we've heard, unprecedented. I mean, not least for the unprecedented use of the word unprecedented, but that's a different matter. But so I think the key thing is that we work jointly. It's called the joint committee. Both committees are the joint committee, and I think that's the crucial part of how we go forward.
Then also we probably want to be led by the danger of groupthink actually rushing off in certain directions for the flavour of the moment. I'd just like some assurance that we're going to have a proper evidence base of I don't even want to say experts, but people who might understand this, so that we aren't just chasing the tail of the latest fad.
Yeah, I think we can give you that reassurance, to be honest. And I want to make sure that we've separated these two issues. This isn't about the city region boards so much and that funding. That funding is an allocation that the board will then need to draw down now based on the sort of evidence. But certainly any other decisions we make in terms of the COVID-19 recovery, then we will need to have the best evidence available before we make decisions. But that will be a joint thing. I mean, obviously the LEP play a crucial part, we play a crucial part, the districts and the borough and the cities play a crucial part in this. So I'm sure you'll be on the case of scrutinising to make sure that evidence base is there.
Thank you. Did Dev want to add anything to that from the next point of view?
I would agree with Patrick. It is complex at the moment in terms of recovery planning, particularly. But all I'd say is that there is an awful lot of collaboration going on right now, so that we don't duplicate effort. And hopefully, when we come out of it, we can look back and say, you know, this has been a good team effort across the county.
I did have his hand's gone now. John, are you still wanting to speak or not? Sorry, Paul. Paul, not John. Paul. Can't hear you, Paul. You're on.
The question I was thinking of asking may be appropriate later in the agenda, but bearing in mind this is a public meeting, I thought we ought to know whether or not Gloucestershire has all the COVID data that it needs, given what's happened in Leicester. Do we have it down to postcode, and are we able to make best use of that? Say that may be a question for now, or maybe just a bit later in the agenda, but somebody may need to think about the question anyway.
I'm not we're obviously talking about the granular nature of the test and trace. That's more a public health thing, so we can certainly find out. I would suggest we probably don't have it in the way that we would want, otherwise we'd probably be on our own in the country on that one. I think the situation has proved that Public Health England haven't managed to divest that sort of granular information fast enough to the local authorities. So, but I think that's something we can chase up. Maybe Sophie, we could ask a question to Sarah Scott.
Thank you.
Response.
Okay. I mean, maybe Sophie can we can monitor that information as soon as we have it. Well, something the joint committee can then use. Simon, got your hand up. You're muted, Simon.
Oh, am I?
That's it now. You're okay now.
Okay, two of us doing it. Okay, fair enough. Okay, one was I was thinking about the what sort of are we putting in place any new structures in terms of the evolving situation to make decision making more effective, and also picking up on the data points, so we're actually getting a flow of data, and also the point about in terms of economic recovery, the government are punching out sort of guidance and funding pots left, right, and centre. And do we have an effective way of getting that information out, particularly to the small and medium businesses? And then, just prompted by the last question, really, I think we know nationally those businesses and workplaces that are of high risk of transfer of COVID-19. Are we aware of them, and are we as a county doing anything over and above in terms of guidance to them?
I think Pat, and then obviously Dev's indicated. Do you want to speak on that, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I think a similar answer before, really. We did at the joint committee meeting actually all agree that the joint committee would probably be the coordinating and amalgamating and steering group and the sort of focus. So in that respect, we're not going to create any other structures specifically for COVID-19 recovery. We have those structures with the LEP, the county councils, the districts. I think we've decided that stick with what we've got rather than try and reinvent the wheel. And we know how that works, and that's probably the best way. So that we will be that sort of steering, coordinating role. It was a question about data, I think, was in there, and I think that is down to monitoring the situation very carefully. The government is firing out lots of advice, and we are trying to keep on top of that and disseminating that advice as far as we can. Schools have obviously been a key part of all this, and I think we've done rather well in the county in that respect in terms of helping the schools get through some of that advice and the guidance. In terms of the sort of funding that's come down from government, the business grant schemes, those have been disseminated down to the district councils. So again, as soon as the money's there, it is being pushed through to where the front end, if you like. And I think we've been very successful across the county about delivering those grant funds to the small, medium-sized businesses and those eligible for it to date. So I think we're doing a pretty good job at the moment. But it is changing, and we have to be light on our feet, if you like, to take on board anything that does come our way.
Okay, thank you for that. David, I think you wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, just to add to that, to reassure Simon, I mean, the LEP has been spending an awful lot of time and effort pushing out the messaging from government as precise and timely as possible. And I've been spending at least 50% of my time on the comms message for the LEP. That then goes out through the Growth Hub network across the county as well, our own task force, which has all the local authorities on, but also organisations like the FSB, the NFU, Circle to Success. They all then cascade that effort down. And as Pat was saying, I think the districts have done a really good job actually getting these business grants out. I sit on a weekly meeting with all the finance directors. We talk it through. We talk through the issues, and over £125 million has gone out to over 12,000 businesses across the county. And in a really short period of time, to set up funding schemes like that normally take 3 to 6 months, and the finance teams around the county have been turning these things around in 2 to 4 weeks. So the grants that have gone out, you're looking at £10,000 and £25,000 grants to roughly a third of all the businesses in the county. So I think that's a pretty good job by all concerned.
Yeah, I think disseminating it to the districts, I think the districts are going to, I know our district, and I've heard of other districts doing a fantastic job of disseminating grants. The only issue I have with those grants is they didn't suit all, they were quite caveated, so therefore a little bit, we still have businesses that are now struggling because they didn't meet whatever criteria was necessary, and that's something I think we need to keep an eye on to make sure that we don't prioritise certain businesses and leave other businesses out. And I think that's something I think as a county we may be doing to look at, because there are businesses out there that are really struggling because they didn't meet the criteria the government set out, even with the devolved one that we actually have a little bit more choice on. It was still well caveated, wasn't it? I think we're basically, I don't think there's anybody else chatting. I don't know. Is there anybody else mention anything, Kate?
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, sorry,
Stephen Davis
Stephen
as well.
Stephen, okay. Have you got your hand up, Stephen?
I did. I raised my hand.
I can't see it on my
At
screen.
the bottom of the list, Chair.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Chair. Yeah, sorry. I keep scrolling up and down. Sorry, Stephen. Yes, Stephen.
No, that's okay. Just a couple of points. And actually, I have to say, one of the things we've done at Stroud District Council is we have all 4 political parties working together on the COVID-19 thing. And the grant distribution has gone well, which has been good. And the feedback would, right back at the beginning of what Patrick said, he said that the districts and county and LEP were working well together. I just wanted to echo that. There has been a real feeling that people have got on and done stuff, and I think we should note that in this meeting. And just as an aside, we in Stroud think that the City Region Board is a name we struggle to associate with, but we won't go on about that.
We are where we are, Nigel.
Yeah, I did try and give that reassurance about the name. It's
Yes,
my board. We are, but the two cities, it's the regions around.
So if you can lower your hand, Stephen, please, so I don't get confused again, because it's not difficult. I managed to do that to auto myself. Right. Well, I think that's basically it, Pat. Thank you for your time. I think you're back on item 6, but I think we've mostly covered item 6. The only thing I will say to the committee is, obviously, when we're talking about the indicators that we're talking about, that obviously is public health. This is economic growth. So I know they're important to us, but we do need, this isn't the public health meeting. This is the economic growth scrutiny meeting. Right. Well, I'm going to hand over to Dev now for our G First Step update. I know we had one at the joint meeting, but I think there is, as Pat said, there's a little bit more news now. So if I can hand over to Dev, please.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody, properly. I think I know most people on the screen, but for those who don't know me, my name's Dev Chakraborty. I'm the Deputy Chief Exec of the LEP. I've got 3 areas just to update the committee on, which I hope will be helpful. A quick update on our growth deal projects, an update on the county's inward investment project, and then an update on something that's quite hot off the press, a new funding pot from government, which you probably heard Boris talking about earlier this week, build, build, build. So I can give you a bit of an update on how that affects Gloucestershire. So a growth deal, yes, COVID, unprecedented, I'll say it as well. Something the LEP team have been working hard throughout the period, though, is to make sure all the growth deal projects that we've been working on keep ticking along. Nothing has paused at all. Yes, it's been challenging, but behind the scenes, whether it's working on the due diligence, working on getting funding agreements signed off, all of that has continued. So some important projects for the county, like the West Cheltenham transport scheme, the walking and cycling scheme in West Cheltenham, the airport schemes, and Gloucester Railway Station, all of those have been ticking along in the background. So yes, there's been a little bit of time lost, but not the full sort of lockdown period. So that's positive news. With regards to the inward investment project, this is the project that all the districts, the boroughs and the county have contributed towards. And it's the project where we're trying to attract foreign-owned companies into the county. Well, as you can imagine, all the major national and international events from March onwards have been cancelled. Things like the Farnborough Air Show, MIPIM in the south of France. The LEP had a mission going out to South Korea with the Honourable Company of Gloucestershire. That's also been cancelled. So add that to virtually a worldwide lockdown, and businesses have not been knocking on anybody's door to potentially look to relocate anywhere in the world. So it's certainly, that has come to quite a halt, the inward investment project for the time being. Having said that, we've redeployed that team onto COVID-19 and recovery planning. And the majority of that team have been making outbound calls to the largest companies in the county, asking how COVID-19 has affected their business, what issues they need help with, and all of that has been fed into our own recovery planning and our daily calls with central government. And then the new funding pot, I think at the last scrutiny meeting, my colleague Mally came along and gave you an update about, at the time it was called our investment portfolio. And I know there were some queries on the actual name for that, but to have a live pipeline, a project pipeline, is obviously the sensible thing to do, because you never know when central government are going to come along and say, hey, we've got a bit of money, what do you want to spend it on? So we have to be ready for that. We were given 6 working days, basically, from when the government department, MHCLG, Minister of Housing, Communities and Local Government, came to us and said, what projects have you got? Here are the criteria. And it was very tight criteria. The projects had to be shovel ready. They had to be completed by December 2021. Recovery was the main theme. Job creation was another key driver, and projects needed to have green credentials as well. So again, we worked really hard with all our local authority partners and higher education, further education, and the private sector to get a good number of projects submitted to central government. It was a really tight turnaround, and when we talked to all our partners, we said, look, this is the time we've been given. If you want to be considered, you need to get your projects in. But when the deadline came just over a week ago, we submitted for the county 15 projects in total, totaling £52 million. There were projects in every district and borough in the county, which was great. To manage expectations, we absolutely won't be getting £52 million. We were waiting to hear what the announcement would come from central government earlier this week, and that the figure that came out was £900 million for the whole of England. And so if you look at England and look at where Gloucestershire sits, broadly speaking, Gloucestershire represents about 1% of economic output for the whole of England. And also, broadly speaking, it represents about 1% of the population as well. So if the pot's 900 million, we anticipate we're going to get a figure of about £9 million there or thereabouts. But we'll know more about that next week. That project pipeline has now been submitted. You'll be familiar with some of the projects that are on that list. Projects like King Square in Gloucester. Projects like the Tewkesbury Garden Town, Cheltenham to Gloucester Cycle Highway, Bishop's Cleeve to Cheltenham Cycle Highway. So they're all in the mix. They're the most important projects for the LEP right now, and they hit that criteria of being shovel ready and hopefully being able to be completed by December 21. And then right at the back of our own minds is also our local industrial strategy. We put a lot of work into that. There was a huge consultation process that went across the county for that, and we were pleased with the outcome. So we don't suddenly now want to change our priorities. So the cyber sector is a big priority for us. The environment is big for us, and agri-tech is big for us. And obviously we want to try and keep young people in the county. So I'm hoping next week we'll know what the figure is we're going to get from government. We don't know if there's going to be any negotiation on that. And then very quickly we have to work with our partners to sort of get full business cases as much as possible pulled together, so that by middle of July we can get our full submission to government. So they're really the sort of 3 areas I wanted to update the committee on. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah. Brian, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just a simple question, really. In order for these items to be shovel ready, they must have progressed far enough that they were conceived before this pandemic. So in reality, we weren't going to be responsive to the pandemic. We're only going to actually bring forward things that we were planning to do anyway. Would you accept that?
Not quite true, I would say. In that, yes, we had the existing project pipeline that don't forget the whole effort of the LEP is to drive economic growth anyway, and to identify the key sector growth areas. But we did also ask all our partners for what we called exceptional projects that weren't on the existing pipeline, but they felt that it was something that could genuinely help with recovery. So there were some exceptional projects that came into the list at short notice, and some of the you're right to say in terms of planning permission, particularly, that is a big driver. I don't know whether Simon wants Simon Excel wants to chip in, but some of these projects, they have been working along in the background anyway to get planning permission for some of them, and some like King Square and Tewkesbury Town, the Garden Town, that again they will be creating a lot of jobs, and that's something the LEP believes is the right way to be funding.
Okay, thank you.
Kate, you indicated.
Sarah Fledgley. Thank you. And it sort of picks up from there. You mentioned that the three projects, King Square, the Cheltenham Gloucester Cycleway, and the Garden Town, and you said those would have a completion date of by December 21. But is that the same date for all those three projects, or actually, something like the Cycleway, which I know people are very impatient to get underway and seems to be a project that's been a long time coming, as Pastor Robinson said. Do we have a date for that? I know that the Member of Parliament for Gloucester yesterday was inviting the Prime Minister to cycle along it with him. So, is there any prospect of being able to anticipate such a visit?
Well, I think, to be honest, that I think was one of the drivers of some of these projects, were that, we're already in challenging times, but they're not going to get easier in the coming months, particularly as furloughing ends. So I think ministers and the Prime Minister would like to get out on site with their hard hats on and be showing these investments that are going to be creating real jobs. I think in answer to that question, Kate, a number of those projects I mentioned, and that's just a sample of them, they're large projects, but what the partners were submitting to us were elements of those projects. So for King Square, there were certain areas of King Square redevelopment and regeneration that we would be funding and could be completed by December 21. It wouldn't be the whole of the regeneration project would be completed by December 21. But I think that the cycle highways, if funding could be agreed for that, the timeline we've been given from the County Council is that they could be completed by December 21.
Simon, I think you wanted to add that.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to add to what's been said, on both of the schemes which I'm scheme promoter for, which Dev's already outlined, namely Cheltenham to Bishop's Cleeve Cycleway and Cheltenham to Gloucester Cycleway, the design of both of those schemes is very well progressed, and I've ensured that the team over several months now, well before CV19, have enabled us to, as Dev alluded to earlier, press the button as soon as funding became available. And we never know what funding is going to become available from, whether it's the LEP or whether it's from central government. But the team have got a prioritised list of schemes, those two being very close to the top of the list, which are well progressed. And if we are successful in getting the funding from the LEP, then that funding will be put together with existing funding we've already got, whether that's from developers or whether from the County Council coffers. And we will do our very best to enable the development and completion of those schemes by December 2021. But obviously, in order to do that, we will need a decision sooner rather than later, so we can press the button and get on site.
Simon. Right, okay. Nikki Packer.
Thank you. I just wondered if the the list is available of the projects.
It isn't publicly available at the moment, purely because some of the projects have been marked as confidential by the promoters, and we don't want to build up other people's expectations, I think, also. So the projects I've mentioned are the more higher profile, familiar ones to people. But as and when we know what the scale of our funding actually is, and we can announce these are the projects that are going to get it, then they will obviously go into the public domain very quickly.
Thank you.
I was going to add to that. Obviously, we have asked, I asked at the joint meeting as well, that they can allow us to and give us information so that we can scrutinise. I understand you're talking about some of them are confidential, but obviously we do sign confidential paperwork that allows us to have confidential information. So how on earth can we scrutinise something if we don't know about it? You know, if it just comes on stream and the public are told about it at the same time we're told about it, we're actually then scrutinising a decision that's already been made. So I wonder, Dev, if we can actually have a chat offline about this, because we do need this information to be able to scrutinise the LEP going forward, because obviously, as the government pointed out to you at your last, when they last looked into you to check you all over and stuff, that you know, you do need to be scrutinised. So how can we scrutinise something that's a secret?
I think I would be very comfortable to share it with the group, but this is a public meeting, so happy to share it after the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Dev. And then obviously moving forward, it's obviously we're in a different time now. It was a question. It was something that we are asking the questions now. Scrutiny has changed a little bit, and obviously the joint committees have changed a little bit. It's how we're all going to work together to make sure we do scrutinise everything going forward. And obviously that needs a little bit of input from the joint committee and from the LEP to actually help us, because we don't want to demand things that we can't have or you're struggling to give us, but we also do want information that we can have and do want. Okay. I don't think I can see any. Kate and Brian, you still have your hands up. You wanted to ask questions, or is it just that you've got rheumatoid arthritis and your hands are still stuck in? Okay, thank you.
Actually, Kevin, I did want to come in, but my hand.
Sorry, you did. Okay. Yeah.
I put my hand down. I put it back up again. You see.
Okay. So I just noticed it back up. Sorry, because I was putting it wrong.
It's just a question, since we've got Dave here, about retail. I just wondered if he had any thoughts about how retail will come back, given that we've had sort of 3 months where the not only have we had the pandemic, but the online shopping side has been given a huge boost. So I just wondered if the LEP had any thoughts around what that might mean going forward.
I wish I had a magic wand and a crystal ball for you, Brian. I think one positive for the county, central government has set up a high streets task force for the whole country, and our chair, Diane Savoury, is on that task force. So we're the only LEP in the whole country that has representation on that. It is, I mean, it's scary looking at the high streets at the moment, and anxiety levels of people. I've seen a lot of surveys of people not really wanting to rush back into the shops. But I think I'll be moving on really to the next item on the agenda in terms of recovery planning. But one of the key interventions, if you like, that the LEP are proposing in our own recovery plan is a Think Gloucestershire campaign, and that Think Gloucestershire would encompass staycations to support the visitor economy and the tourism sector. It would support shopping locally as opposed to Amazon, and it would support local procurement as well for all sectors and the large public sector as well for the county. So a Think Gloucestershire campaign is something that we certainly would like to push out, and the more partners we could get to also push out that message would certainly help.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deb, I mean, going on from the high street thing that we're talking about, obviously, in my own division, there was something suggested. I'm not sure whether it came from the network, came from the members about, there was a suggestion of it pedestrianising the high street. Now, people thought that was suggested and was potentially going to happen. Some of the retailers were absolutely upset about it. As you said earlier, you don't want to set people's expectations or worry people or get people excited. So if you have let members that are looking at things like that, can they go through the correct channels rather than sending hairs running, please?
Sure.
If you can just point that out.
That wasn't us, though. That wasn't us who were proposing that, by the way.
But it's funny how people didn't know anything about the LEP, actually mentioned your name and wouldn't normally know about you. So I think one of your members actually mentioned your name. So you just need to sort of make sure your members, don't tag you into that. That's all I'm going to say. Anybody else indicating? Saj?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question regarding business grants. Business grants that's been provided to many of the businesses that have remained closed during the lockdown is not sufficient for them because, for example, some of the hairdressers and barbers in my ward who were allocated grants of £10,000. When your business is closed for several months, you're actually losing more than that £10,000. Is there any proposal to support these businesses further with further additional grants? And to add on to that, I don't know what that knocking noise is. To add to that, there have been some businesses, convenience stores, etc., that have actually been thriving during lockdown and during this pandemic, and they have been awarded the £10,000 grant as well. To me, that doesn't make sense that we're being allocating grants to a business that's actually doing better than they did before the pandemic. Surely it would have been better if we would have use that pool of money to support the businesses that have been closed during the lockdown, would it not? Or is that something that's not within our hands and that's a government scheme and therefore any businesses are entitled to apply for that grant and we there's no restriction on that?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I mean, you are right. This is a central government decision. Those business grants were based purely on rateable value, whether a business was open or closed. And I think it reflects the speed of having to turn around schemes like this. You're always going to get on the edge businesses who do fall through the cracks, unfortunately, and those who get rewarded. And perhaps, as you say, the supermarkets all qualified for business grants, and I know some have made donations to charity with that money, but I think the answer to that part is the central government just wanted to get a scheme out that could get cash in businesses' bank accounts quickly. Hindsight's a wonderful thing to go back and say, but what if we did this, or we could have done that? That's why the second wave was a discretionary fund that came out, and there were some quite rigid guidelines from central government to the boroughs and the districts, but they did have some flexibility on that. And as far as I'm aware, the majority of that money has now gone out the door. There isn't a plan to do a second call for the discretionary fund. And then we're all waiting to see, I think, what the Chancellor Rishi Sunak will announce next week, whether there'll be another round of business grants, because, as you say, some sectors are still closed, and whether furloughing for particular sectors will also be extended. So I think that's a case of watch this space for next week.
Yeah, can I just add to that as well? I mean, obviously, Saj, there were businesses that got money that, like, as you just described, but there are businesses that still haven't had any money because whatever reason they didn't qualify. So, you know, there were winners and there were losers. I think that's sort of the case with most things that happen in life, unfortunately. I think that's everybody with those questions. Anybody else wish to indicate? Saj, can you lower your hand, please?
Chair, if I can come back again, please. Thank you very much. In addition to the business grants, I am aware that businesses have also been offered £50,000 loans by the government. I know quite a few small businesses that have applied for this loan. Just curiosity question. If a business was granted this loan of £50,000 and then 6 months down the road, they cease operating or change hands, what would happen? Would they still be liable to pay the £50,000 loan back, or would it be lost at the taxpayer's expense? Do we know about that at all?
I think I don't know categorically is the answer, but I do know that a lot of the big banks are expecting that the bounce back loans and the C-bills, the coronavirus loan scheme, that they are preparing that they won't get 100% back. Absolutely. And the percentage that they are going to get back could also be quite a scary figure for the economy.
Okay,
that's worrying.
Yeah. Are you finished now, Saj? Can you lower your hand? I think that's everybody with the questions. I'm just scrolling down. Yeah, can't see anybody else. Okay, so item 6. I know we've had we've sort of wandered in and out of this part of our agenda with several of our items already. But I mean, obviously, we will just visit it anyway, just in case there's anybody else. And welcome to Colin, if there's anybody else who wants to add anything to it. Patrick, did you want to add anything to item 6?
No, I don't think so at this stage, Chair. Happy to sort of get involved in discussion or answer questions or what have you.
Dev, have you got anything else to add? Because you did refer to it. You got anything else to add on the recovery?
Yeah, just a couple of things. It appears there'll be at least seven recovery plans for the county. So all the districts and the local and the boroughs are producing their own place-based recovery plan. The LEP is producing an economic sector-based business plan. So when it comes to the place element of things, that's for local authorities. We've been sharing on a weekly basis business intelligence and data with Leadership Gloucestershire. That we've done surveys, we've done the call outs I touched on earlier that talk about some of the doom and gloom effectively and putting numbers on it. I think we were the first to announce that the total number of furloughed people in the county is 76,300. And as soon as we get that data, we do share that out across all our partners here on the screen. And yesterday we shared a sector analysis report, again with Leadership Gloucestershire, and an economic modelling report that we had commissioned, which is broken down by district. So that has gone to the leaders and the chief execs of all the local authorities. So I would certainly ask to see that from them.
Thank you. We've got Simon and we've got Colin online now. Have you got anything to add to obviously the COVID-19 response to Gloucestershire economic recovery?
Right.
You're on now, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yes. There was a delay in it responding on the screen. So every time I touched it, it was showing the wrong thing. So I touched it and then went back again. Sorry. Right. Yeah, I mean, picking up what Dev's point is, yeah, we're leaving the districts. I mean, the role of the council, I think, probably in this is one of leadership, coordination, analysis, qualitative analysis, and then using that analysis and evidence to check and make sure that collectively we're all moving in the right direction. And if we're not, to make sure that people are aware of that, and then make sure holes and gaps are filled and plugged where necessary. We have our own role, without any doubt, in certain respects. I think a big chunk of that will be going towards as well as everything else we're doing in terms of, you know, the major regeneration, you know, the work to drive Cyber Park forward, and all the major schemes, the M5, J10, J9. They're also the slightly slower burn stuff that are absolutely vital for strengthening the economy going forward into the future. There's also the more localised stuff that we would need to do. And I'm talking to Pete Carr at the moment, who heads up the adult education unit, to make sure that our skill training that's going to be offered aligns with the LEP, and more importantly, enables people, and the emphasis has changed to make sure that we can reskill people or get people into a different type of career. And probably, I think, probably singularly the most important thing of all the research at the moment shows that the people who are going to be most hit are the 17 to 24-year-olds. Those who haven't got work experience, even those who are coming out of university, are now finding it very, very difficult to get jobs. And as a consequence of that, I think the emphasis has got to be on that group and what we can do to look and help them move forward. Particularly, you know, it's going to be bad enough for those that come out with a degree, but it's going to be even worse for those that haven't got that level of qualification and are coming out of school. And it's about how we actually manage that going forward and help and assist. So that's really where we're coming from. So it's a broad-based coordination, leadership, evidence gathering role, supporting the LEP and working with the LEP and making sure the districts are sort of directed in the right place. What I would say and fully support is that something that Dev just alluded to. I'm sorry I couldn't get in, so I missed Dev's actual presentation. I was having trouble with my computer, but the response has got to be, everyone wants to be seen to do something straight away, and this is a slow burn fuse without a doubt whatsoever. The truth is we don't know the size of the problem, and we don't even know where the problem is at this moment in time, because all the government grants and furlough and everything are covering a multitude of sins. There's probably companies that probably even without COVID would have gone bust by now, just the natural evolution of companies. But why would you declare you're gone bust when you can grab hold of furlough and keep yourself going? There's others that won't even know they're bust until that were comfortable businesses and going into furlough, going into COVID, and furloughs popped them up. But when they come out the other side, there'll be the shock that will echo through that business. And as a consequence of that, it's going to be very, very difficult at this moment in time to see which businesses will or will not survive. And for that reason, we should not get into localised business support, because if we do, all we'll do is end up supporting businesses that probably could easily go to the wall. It'd be good money after bad. And what we need to do is go for a sectoral approach, basically looking at sectors where, you know, looking at the weaknesses in the sectors and see how that can be strengthened, looking at how we can support sectors to go forward, and working on a sectoral or geographical basis where we raise the platform. I think I said this the other day at the previous scrutiny I was at, raise the platform to a high enough level that everyone in that sector or geographical location stand a better chance of survival and can springboard off, rather than try to pick out, and we will get it wrong, pick out certain business to try and support.
Okay, thank you. Simon, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to add, I mean, my expertise and speciality is strategic infrastructure. That's my job title. So back in early March, pre-CV19, you know, we had some wonderful news from the government in that the A417 missing link was given the thumbs up, M5 Junction 10 given the thumbs up, and M5 Junction 9 given the thumbs up. So we had, you know, a very good early March, and then all of a sudden 2 weeks later CV19 hit and had a huge significant impact on all of the major schemes, not just those I've just mentioned there, but much more that we were progressing through mostly LEP funding. So it's been difficult, excuse me, it's been difficult, and it's a really mixed message in that some of the schemes have been delayed, as you've seen in Colin's director's report, through no fault of our own. You know, Gloucester South West Bypass was due to have a public inquiry, that was delayed. The A417 missing link, Highways England have now confirmed that that's been delayed, unfortunately, perhaps between 8 and 12 months. But that said, the schemes which we, as in the County Council, have got control and funding for, we are pushing out all the stops at the moment to ensure, or at least try to ensure, that those schemes progress. So certainly M5 Junction 10, the team are working farcical hours at the moment to, following the positive funding announcement, to enable the drawdown of the £220 million by hopefully late summer, early autumn. Similarly, M5 Junction 9, the team are working on a business case to get to the DFT next year. And I think Dev's already outlined the West Cheltenham Transport Improvement Scheme, you know, cyber, £22+ million, where the team have already started construction on phases 1 and 2 at the Arcourt roundabout. So it's not all bad news, and we are trying desperately with the resources and capacity that we have to try and get through this and to get all of these schemes under construction as soon as possible, for fear of losing the money due to the national funding associated with CV19. So I don't want to go through the director's report in any more detail than that, but just to say that the County Council are attempting to pull out all the stops to progress these schemes to the best of our ability.
Okay, thanks for that. I do have Brian, you indicated your hands back down. Did you want to speak, or you were the first hand up?
No, I put my hand down again.
Okay, thank you. Kate?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just a quick question to Deb. You mentioned these reports that you're sending to leaders and chief executives at districts, and obviously there's district reps on this committee as well. So would it be possible to circulate those two committees so that that conversation can be had from a position of knowledge, rather than just sort of not know what's in the reports as to whether or not there's appropriate actions to be taken at councils, whether in council meetings or through their scrutiny processes?
Yep, happy to do that.
Thank you. I think scroll down now. I think that's everybody's hand up or down. So I think we've maybe dealt with item 6. Is everybody happy with that? Quickly indicate if not. Okay. Right. Thank you. Right. Item 7, and thank you to all the presenters on that. That's very useful. Work plan. Going back to our own committee now. Marvellous. Work plan. Right. We have several items on our work plan. We've been talking about obviously COVID-19. Seems like forever now, but it's not been very long really. And some of the things we have on our work plan are no longer potentially applicable. I just wondered, obviously, COVID-19 is going to feature very heavily as a more or less a permanent agenda item moving forward, you know, with almost the format that we've had today. And I just wondered, you know, for Sophie's help, better fit really, is there any other items that you wish to remove from that list? And is there any other items that you want to add to it? It will probably be, to be perfectly honest with you, maybe 1 or 2 a meeting. We're not sure, because obviously, as I said, the format is going to almost, for the next few meetings, is going to mirror what we've already been doing, because obviously the recovery plan is obviously the most prevalent with it, and obviously the joint committee and what they're up to, and the LEP, what they're up to, is obviously something that we need to scrutinise. So it's additional items that we need to do. We did have the taxi licensing, which is one Kate brought forward. So if you want to just start with that one, Kate, and what we spoke about the other day, and what you want to move forward with that one. You're on mute, Kate.
I think there's probably one more meeting in the taxi licensing, but we're just about to finalise the report. I think I need to talk to as I understand it, Sophie, I might have someone working with me on that. So if we can discuss that outside the meeting, I'm not sure what the appetite will be amongst members for meeting in August, given that we're still probably not going on holiday. But we'll find if we can find a date to bring that either at the next meeting or the meeting after that. I think we can hopefully achieve that. It will need to go out to districts as well for their endorsement as an approach. So yeah, I'd like to do that. And the other thing, Chair, was we were going to look at the list of possible future items, I think, and see if there was anything that perhaps isn't now as relevant as it was when we added it. Thank you.
Okay, so I mean, obviously we've got a list on the existing meetings. We're going to look at the local transport plan. Is that still going to go ahead, Sophie, the joint meeting on the local transport plan?
Yeah, so the joint meeting for the local transport plan was obviously due in May. It has now been delayed until the end of September, and I've circulated that date for the committee. So on your work plan that's published with your pack, you'll see that's on the 23rd of September. So that's an additional date for this committee to join the Environment Committee.
We have on a list here a Q1 2021 performance report. Is that where are we now going to be able to fit that one in? Because it would be still useful for us to, obviously, with the scrutiny we have to do now, seeing that performance report, whether it would be something that you could chat on within a meeting, or whether it's just something you would have an update via email.
Yeah, very happy to do whatever works best for the scrutiny committee.
So how do the scrutiny committee want to move forward with that one? We're quite happy to leave that one as an agenda item, because are we still going to have a meeting in September or not?
Yeah, the meeting on the 16th will still go ahead. So yeah, you do need some items to go there. I'm happy also to take a discussion offline with the LEP, because we did have a bit of a timeline for the performance reports, which will have slipped now. So we maybe need to revisit those and see when would be suitable to bring each quarter report.
Okay. But do we want to bring that one in September then, so far or not?
Yeah, if committee want to do that, I can have the discussion offline to see if that will be okay, Dev.
Okay. Are the committee happy with leaving that one in September? Okay. Brian, you indicated.
Thank you.
I'll update afterwards.
Yeah, I on the first point of the taxi task group, I would be very happy to have a virtual meeting to bring that to a conclusion, because it's sort of been outstanding for quite a long time now. My thoughts are picking up from Simon Excel's point that really, we all want to rush and get something done in response to this, but it's probably a bit of a slow burn because we won't know the impacts as they start to emerge. But one time when we will start to see some of those impacts emerging is when we come out of the furloughing scheme later this year. So I think it would be important to put on our agenda plan that we look at employment or unemployment and also impact on businesses. So maybe get the LEP and whoever else back to update us in the October meeting. Is that too soon? Not sure when the furlough finishes, but we need to get that fed in. And also I'd like to see us look at, we're looking at a transport plan, but again, I think that needs to be looked at with the fresh eyes of post-COVID. And also, I think we should be looking at retail, because I think to have a successful retail strategy going forward, we might need to do some place shaping, helping some to develop and others to contract and repurpose to reflect changing shopping habits going forward. And that's something that's probably beyond the individual business to do, and therefore would require the public sector in Gloucestershire to sort of help steer that. So I think we should be interested in how that progresses. But I'm not sure when they come on. There might be sort of an early next year timetable for those. Thanks.
Okay. So Sophie, just talking back to you, and then I'll go to Kate. Are we looking for another item for the 16th of September meeting?
Yes, please.
Okay. Just have a thought on that, guys, before, and I'll go to Kate just in case you've got something you want to add into that.
Well, it was kind of on that point, Chair. I noticed that there's a housing, including a review of potential changes to the joint call strategy, and I don't know what the timeline is on that. So that would be a potential point of interest, because obviously the noises from government about building out of the recession, having a look at where our housing strategies are at as a county might be timely on the 16th of September if we've got something that we can look at.
Okay.
And the other thing on that list, Chair, we've got transportation links, but we're having a review of the local transport plan. So would that tick that particular box? And also we've got engaging with the 16 to 50-year-old age group, but I'm aware that the public participation task and finish group is ongoing, and I'm sure that they are covering, engagement across the board. So I don't know whether that's still something that we would be considering as a committee, just to sort of drop some things off the list, and maybe on some of the others it would be useful to have. I mean, I don't know if the people who put them on the list are still on the committee, but some idea as to what people think those particular items are about, what we're looking at.
Okay. Right. Well, I've got Simon. I'm just going to give something. So quickly go into your thoughts about that housing in September. Is that something? Colin, is that something that we could do, or is that too soon? Or Simon, I'm not sure who would lead on that.
So what was that for September, Kevin? I missed that.
Kate, what was it you wanted?
There's an item on the possible future item as housing. We're just seeing significant noises in central government about building our way out of the recession. And I know there's been moves towards having a more strategic approach across the county on housing. Plus, of course, there is the joint call strategy. So understanding where we are with that might be useful in terms of, promoting growth in the county.
I think it's a difficult one. I mean, first of all, obviously, the county is not responsible for housing. That's the responsibility of districts. And where the county is concerned, we actually have very little teeth. It's almost we're almost a consultative body in terms of how things get built. Our biggest power to make sure things happen is obviously making sure that, for example, the 9,000 houses at West Cheltenham won't happen if we don't get Junction 10 done and implemented. The Garden Town at Ashchurch won't happen if we don't get Junction 9 put in. So that's our big role in this. What I am trying to do at the moment is very early days. Is I've sort of done an outline, sort of growth, a county-wide growth strategy of broad direction that we as a county should try and promote, because one of the problems we have at the moment is that because of the way the system is now set up since basically the planning teeth of counties were taken away, is that the local plans are developed by the districts, and that dictates where the house is going to take place in the future and what land will be released. And the districts have probably gone, because they're small, they've gone for substantially incremental incremental growth, where you've got a town centre or a town, and they put another ring of development around it, and then gradually you pull another ring, and so it moves, and the town gets bigger and bigger. And of course, it's completely unsustainable because people get moved further and further away from the services in the centre, and then the county have to come in. Then they're so sporadic that in actual fact they can't support a bus service. The county have to put a subsidised bus service in to get people back into the town centre. So what I'm trying to do at the moment, and it's very early days, and it's going to be too early for September, is try to get a strategy that starts to look at, for the future, where we should put development at a strategic level that would be sustainable to meet the needs of the people of Gloucestershire in a way that works, doesn't create more problems, and ultimately long term is sustainable. That is a slower response, because what we're going to do is get the districts on board and everything else, and that's only literally, I only did the executive summary of that yesterday and sent it to Mark to look at. So that's how early that one is. So it's probably too early to discuss. The rest of it is really down to districts on housing, or what we can do from an infrastructure perspective to give the necessary means to support the growth that's needed in terms of housing. So that's where we are, and yeah, it'd be a difficult subject to address at a county level, really.
Well, I beg to differ in some ways, because we know the districts have been working together. I mean, 3 of them have been working together for a decade on a joint core strategy around housing that is not only well developed, but has been through inspection and adopted by those 3 districts. So, you know, we know where that housing is going over the next decade and a half, 2 decades. And I think, and also there's under the duty to cooperate, you know, discussions between neighbouring districts taking place. If you're saying that as a county doesn't work for us economically as a county, then, you know, that is quite an interesting discussion to have, because I don't believe that you're going to move districts that have been working, you know, a very long time to produce something that's sustainable and can be and you know, can't be challenged by developers in order to come up with a completely different idea. So I think it'd be really useful for this committee to understand, you know, the economic impacts, the impacts on the county. Obviously, there's health and well-being impacts on housing. Some of our residents are in very, very, very poor living conditions. And also, of course, there's the climate change agenda as well, where we've got a lot of housing stock in the county, which I think, as Simon Pickering referred to when we went to Stroud, you know, it's just leaking carbon. So I think there is a piece of work, whether September's the right time to do it, but I think that piece of work should definitely be coming to committee.
I agree. I think it's one of the things it's well worth looking at. I think it's also, I think, really important for members to understand exactly what levers and what levels of intervention the county have, because they are, since the powers were taken away from the counties in 2001 by Eric Pickles, our strategic powers, we've got limited ability to actually influence that argument, and it has to be done. I mean, we are now at the moment trying to join. We've never been in the JCS. We're trying at the moment to join the JCS and have a sensible conversation. That's taken us 9 months, having got agreement to join, because we can't get a legal agreement in place, as Simon will tell you, with the districts, and just as we get there, then the rug is pulled from under our feet on another issue, which makes it even more difficult to join. And that's the way it goes. So yeah, I accept, but I think just all I'm trying to outline was that, you know, the real thrust of this in terms of the housing, unfortunately, is not in our hands. I'd love for us to be a unitary and have that ability to actually get on with the business and drive it.
Let's
say that
let's
openly.
not start that argument.
Yeah, that's how you do it. At the moment, it's in the hands of the districts to drive that housing agenda.
Kate,
just to say, we are a scrutiny committee. We have no decision-making powers, but we do have powers to influence and shape the responses of all the councils. We're a joint committee, so there are district members here. So if that is an issue that districts ought to be considering, this is the place to raise those issues so that districts can consider some of the opportunities. But yeah, don't start the unitary debate today.
No. Can we? So I mean, to move this on, then obviously from what I'm hearing, September will be too soon. So what I'm trying to do is, what I don't want to leave. That doesn't need to be taken off the agenda. It needs to be kept on the agenda, because, as Colin has indicated, it would be a useful discussion, you know, going forward. So obviously we'll leave that on our possible future items, but it won't be for September. We still want a light item for September, because we are still going to be looking at the same sort of agenda as we've looked at today. But we do want something that's fairly light. There are some of the lists. I'm going to go to Simon now for him to quickly add anything to it.
Hi. I agree with Colin's comments about housing strategically. It is unfortunately a district matter. So much as we all miss structure plans. There you go. However, as an economic scrutiny, the houses and things will be built. So it strikes, and even before the pandemic, the rise of modular development was becoming increasingly important. And it strikes me that if the government, and this is the way that government funding seems to be going, is to build the country out of the economic crisis, whether it will or not, I don't know. And the 5 billion seemed a bit small, but there you go. But modular development strikes me as a really important area because to this area, and there are locations in the county where a modular factory would be really important. I was talking to a developer just the other day, and most of the modular factories aren't in the southwest yet. And do we want to be the first to get that modular factory to actually capitalise on this and create new skilled jobs? So I think that's an important item, but I'm sort of just going to ask a question really of how this scrutiny committee works really. I mean, do we have the ability to sort of do almost an inquiry style approach to this? Could we just pull in a few, because we're doing it all virtually now, national experts on this and let them give a small presentation and we can question them and have the officers there, almost like a parliamentary inquiry to actually bring the best of knowledge of the UK that we can exploit, provide the links. We have a site for a factory down at Berkeley Green. It could be done. I was just thinking this is something we could do and scrutinise what the national information is.
We have had items where we've had experts come in from outside of the county, yes, and we have done a Q&A session with them. Whether as a county we're able to do that, because as unfortunately it's been pointed out, it is a district responsibility for allocation and what type of houses is built. I get what you're going to say, Simon. I understand that totally. But that what I'm trying to do is shape this, because we have items on the agenda. What I'm trying to get to today is what items can be left on the agenda and and then they can be moved forward for future items. We have housing availability on there. We have modular developments on there. That's something that Sophie can work forward with your suggestions to see what we can do. That won't happen for September. It will probably be early part of next year, because I know you're finding something, but we have got officers that are very busy doing other things as well. So when people are also having sort of breaks as well, because it's the time we can. So we need to look at what we're going to drop off this list and what we want to bring forward. We can look at dates with officers for modular and for housing to make sure that if we're going to scrutinise it and we're going to suggest it, that we do it in the correct way. We're not just doing half a job, we're doing a proper job. So what I would suggest is we leave those two on the list. We allow Sophie to look at what we can do with that. We discuss that with the Vice Chair, the Chair, and obviously with Clara as well, to see how we can move forward with that, Simon. If you have any suggestions, please email Sophie and we can then incorporate them into it. And we can obviously discuss it with Colin as well. We now have Gina on the list very quickly.
Yes, I hope, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. No, I was going back to this very important thing of faster shower, broadband and mobile signals and connectivity. It's really become super important. As we all know, some people here haven't got their videos going because obviously it takes up too much of the broadband. I just wondered whether we ought to be asking, it is perhaps a shorter and quicker thing, although it's a very important aspect to our modern life.
Yeah, and I think it is something that we're working on. I mean, the biggest issue that we do have at the moment is contractors and people to do the work and to do the connections that we need to have done. I think that's the biggest problem. But we can that came up on the joint committee, and I think it will continue to come up because it is one of Patrick's. And I don't know whether you want to add to that, Patrick, but it is one of your parts on the portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we all know, it is connectivity is going to be vitally important going forward. We've found that out at the moment. We are actually doing incredibly well in Gloucestershire, but maybe it is an item, Chair, for you to get a full report on, if you like, and then we can bring you up to date. I think it would be good to actually get out there what it has been done and what we're doing to try and fill in all the little holes and the gaps.
Okay. Right. Okay. So
thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. Okay. Well, what I'm trying to do at the moment, I seem to be going around in circles a little bit. What is it we want to put on the September agenda? We have a list there. I've asked to see if there's anything that we no longer need on that list, or if we need to add anything to that list. So we have as item 1 social mobility. Do we need to keep that on our list, or yes, we do? Kate was saying, but obviously that's something that's a longer agenda item. Business rate pooling. Can we put that into September?
Yeah, I think that might be worth having a look at in September, because obviously there might be an impact on business rates if businesses are going under and our growth is affected, because that's business rate pooling. But I see that as a short item, and I would support looking at fibre and broadband at September as well.
Okay. So Pat, going to the second part of that answer, would you be able to bring a report on the cyber and mobile connectivity in September, quickly?
Yeah, I'm sure we could do that. I'll get in touch, have a chat with the team. I'm sure that'd be okay. I'll organise it with Sophie. Okay.
And business rate pooling, who will be presenting that for us? Would that be? I'm not sure, because that's which officer is responsible for that, Sophie.
Is it Steve?
Would it be Steve Molson?
Yeah, Steve Molson.
I'll take that one away and have a look at that.
Okay, so that would be okay for September, would it? Yes.
Could I just ask for a quick steer from members about what they actually want that item to cover?
You want me to, Chair?
Yeah, okay, carry on. Yeah.
Okay, so it would be the current performance of the business rates pool. If we're anticipating any partner in it, having to be removed from it, as has happened in the past, or anticipating that the pool isn't going to grow in the way that we have. So just an update on where we are with the pool and what the prospects are for it going forward, because it's important we use that money for growth. So yeah,
I mean, I think it would be, if we can at all. I mean, I know I'm asking for a bit of a finger in the air question, but obviously if there are any projections as well, because obviously I know it's very difficult to project, because we've got an uncertain future, but if we have any idea at all whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go on to item 3. You've got national policy development, including industrial strategy. Obviously, Dev, do you want to still keep that on the agenda, and would you be willing to talk on that in the future?
So you dropped out when you just mentioned what it was.
Sorry, national policy development, including industrial strategy. It's item 3 on our possible future item.
We can certainly give you an update on local industrial strategy. As you can imagine, everything is paused with COVID. We're waiting for guidance from central government before we can actually publish.
Okay. So is there anything on the list that members particularly think that shouldn't now be on the list? And is there anything that members want to add to the list? Modular carbon is then at item 13. It doesn't even say that it's that low on the agenda item, but it's something, Simon, if you want to suggest to Sophie on what you by email, what you think we could do and how we could do it, then maybe we can try and build up an agenda item for that going forward. You know, depending on how quickly we can get that up and running. Obviously, we've now got September's item, September's meeting sorted. So it's just, what else does anybody else want to put on that list for you? Does anybody want to take anything off? Kate?
I think we said we could take off the transportation ones because we're doing that in a different way. And there was something else as well, the engaging with the 16 to 50s.
Yeah. So if we take those two off, if anything comes up on those, we can pick them back up again. We've got two items there, one about housing availability and one modular developments and carbon neutral plans. I'm not quite sure now if they haven't become almost one agenda item really, rather than two. Are you shaking your head, Simon? I mean, obviously, in modular does create better availability, though, if we are going to try and make it, you know, quicker and cheaper, doesn't it? So I think they should be on the same agenda, if nothing else. Simon?
I was thinking more modular build from the jobs point of view. If we could develop that and develop the skills, because it's to do with retraining and making sure that we have the sufficient trained staff and people in the county to do it. So yes, it does overlap with allocation, but my point was that houses are going to be, they're allocated anyway in local plans. So where they go and how many is slightly irrelevant, and it's usually the detailed application that comes back in on for each district. But the key is that at the moment people are going with traditional build because there's no real option locally. My point being is, would it be possible to provide an option locally where people could go with a different type of build? I don't know the answers. But it just struck me that this might be an opportunity for the county.
Okay, I do think I know Tewkesbury Borough and I know other districts as well. So yeah, I don't know how far forward they are, and that may be some feedback from each district for them to go in and find out where their districts are, because there's no point reinventing the wheel if somebody's already got it, you know, some quarters ground. And also, modular will potentially be driven by the labour force available to the building industry, and also, you know, the groundworks is still something that is, even though how they build the houses is different, the actual groundworks is basically the same. And obviously, it's finding that work. So that is a big discussion, and we need to put that as a different item. We've got workforce development. I mean, Dev, you did say something about that, and I think you did as well, Colin. So, how do we want to keep that as an agenda item, do you think?
Pete Carr might be a useful guest to come along to this committee.
Yeah, and I think, Colin, you said something about, obviously, the fact that, you know, we've got school leavers now, and you know, so how they fit in. So I think, you know, workforce development, you know, with school leavers. So it may be something that you might want to look at, maybe early part of, you know, later on in the year or early part of next year, to see if we can't, with the COVID-19 issue, develop that. At least. Simon, can you take the microphone off, please?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that would work well, and what may be worth considering, what's something I'm looking at the moment, because I'm conscious of the difficulty for young people who, you know, leave school, haven't got access to a big county, haven't got access to a car, and maybe, you know, in the more remote areas, you know, bus service, you know, not having bus service of the, you know, to get them where they need to get to. About how we can look to sort of run outreach training, possibly using the libraries in a more localised area, in a more localised way, to get that reach out to people rather than expect them to come to the centre. we take the courses to them. So, I mean, that's just an early embryonic idea at the moment. It's about actually trying to roll that sort of stuff out. So by all means, yeah, I think that would be useful.
Okay. Right, we've just struck the list. Geographical context of the South West of England. What do you think about that one? Does anybody think that we should carry on with that one, or do you think we should at the moment that one is actually, comes in with a lot of the other things we talk about anyway? Because obviously, Colin, you're on the regional board now, aren't you? So I mean, obviously, on your reports, that will probably feed part of that will feed into that anyway, won't it?
Yes, I mean there hasn't been much to report so far. It's the early days where they're putting the governance in place and other things. I mean, the first thing probably from Western Gateway was recently, where in terms of a proactive thing, was they supported our lobbying for the new Metro West service out to Gloucester, which was announced very recently, that coming in 2022, the half-hour service to Bristol. And they are supporting our bid through to the government for shovel-ready schemes for the B4603 cycle scheme. So again, it's early days, but we're just starting to see their involvement now. So, and I'll make sure that my director's report covers Western Gateway going forward.
Okay, so I mean, item, so we can drop that one off. I have Paul raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll take it down before I forget. It was just on this idea of the sort of physical context of Gloucestershire. In one sense, the geography hasn't changed, but COVID has made such a fundamental change to the way we're working. I think, and whether it's this item or Western Gateway or somewhere else, there is going to be work needed to look back on what we thought were the advantages and disadvantages of the way Gloucestershire is, and see whether some of those disadvantages have gone away, and whether we've got even more important good things. For instance, nice place to work is even more important now, because if people are working from home, they can choose to come here and do it in a way that possibly they couldn't before coronavirus. So I just think it's because we're in a different paradigm now, we perhaps have to just go back and look at some of the things we've done before, just to make sure they're still valid.
I mean, that's something that the joint committee potentially might do anyway, isn't it? Going forward, obviously, with their COVID discussions. Okay, so I mean, obviously, we've taken a few things off the list. Is there anything that anybody particularly feels burning they want to put on the list? Obviously, it's a moving feast at the moment. Simon, rather than putting it on the chat, could you actually just raise your hand and put it forward as a question to the committee, so that we can, rather than have it as a chat, we can actually, discuss it?
It was just information, really, just to pass on. Okay. It was really to do with Colin's point about rural lack of transport and getting people to training. There's a really interesting study done in Yorkshire of the value of e-cycles, and that actually got a much greater value to change to allow greater access from rural areas than in suburban and urban areas.
That may be a future item going forward, Colin, for you to, when we talk about social mobility and how people are getting around, what we're doing. So, yeah, okay. Well, we've crossed a few off. We've left a few on. We've got September's now full. I would like members, not necessarily in this meeting, but to actually put forward, because obviously Kate, myself, and obviously Clara are going to potentially have a meeting just to look at our future agenda items. If anybody has anything they feel that they want to discuss at our next meetings, because we've got future meetings coming up. We've got our future meeting on the 16th of September, which we've got before now. The 23rd of September, which is the additional date, which is the Environment Committee, the Environment Committee as well, which is the Transport Plan. 21st of October, so it's whether anybody has anything they want to include on the 21st of October, if they could just email into Sophie so we can discuss that going forward to see what officer time we have going forward. And then obviously we have the 18th of November as well as a date. So it's whether anybody feels that they want to include something. As I say, most of our agendas will form the same more or less as they are now, because obviously, like I said, we're in a moving feast at the moment. For information, we've had the director's report. Thank you, Colin. And we will be having the review of local meetings. How are we going to take that one forward, Sophie? I mean, we've got it an attached summary. Do we want to discuss that going forward, or are we happy with, because obviously it's got to go to the districts for them to comment as well on the report, hasn't it?
Thank you, Chair. So members will see we've attached Joe Moore and I have put together a report of the outcomes of all your local meetings over the past few years. The item asks members to have a look at that report and email in any observations or comments to myself so I can put that together as a summary report. And the plan then forward would be for Kevin as chair of the committee to circulate that report to all the districts and to the joint committee and to Gloucestershire County Council's full council. So it would be really helpful if members could have a read of that after the meeting and come back to me via email for any comments and observations.
Yeah, it would also be very useful. I know we at CBC, I know John will be obviously, giving that report to Open Scrutiny, which may well go to full council. I didn't know whether other districts will eventually want to discuss the outcomes from those meetings and take them, the individual members from the committee, take them to their own district councils and obviously give any feedback as well from that. Is that okay with district members? Okay, thank you. Right, well, if there's nothing else, I think that's it. Thank you very much for your time. As I said, email in if there's anything on that list you definitely want to have included in any of those meetings, and then we can have a meeting to have a chat about how we formulate our agendas going forward. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, Chair. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Are we off live now, Sophie?